Coming to you from the mountains and the plain. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another day of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And I want to welcome everyone who's new to the channel. Last night we went live with the dispatch radio from Zone 6 in Atlanta and played 2 hours of mostly static. And we have thousands of new people who like the page now, so I want to welcome them and let them know that we do have better content than just static, dead air time. So stick around. We're going to be talking about the walkouts, not just in Atlanta. And Mr. Producer, if you could cut that echo, that'd be great. We're not just going to be talking about the police walkout that happened last night in Atlanta, but we're also going to be talking about other walkouts. We're seeing police officers walking out in LA, or they're calling in sick, the blue flu. We're seeing New York Police Department is removing police officers from being stationed at DA's offices after the DAs are refusing to prosecute the rioters, the looters, the people who were arrested for defying the curfew. They're saying they're not going to prosecute any of them. So we're seeing this around the country. It seems like a pretty good time for a nationwide police walkout. Now, why would I say something like that? Well, Congress right now is debating a bill that would eliminate qualified immunity. And as a conservative, I am against qualified immunity. What qualified immunity means, if you're doing a job in an official capacity as a government official and you're doing your job well, you cannot be sued as an individual. So there's a lot of problems with qualified immunity. I understand that. But the way the Democrats are pushing through this bill is if a police officer does anything wrong to someone, that person can then sue the police officer directly, bankrupt them, take their home, right? Police officers would be required to have malpractice insurance, essentially the same as what surgeons have. And
right.
I don't know any police officer who could afford that kind of insurance. And if the district, if the town paid for that insurance, then the taxpayers are just paying for it. It's a nightmare what Democrats are trying to do, beyond just what we saw in Atlanta yesterday, which we're going to touch upon. We have some clips from that yesterday. It's insane. The backlash against police is insane. A month ago, Nancy Pelosi called them heroes. That was literally the reason behind her so-called HEROES Act. Her massive bailout bill was to give police officers a bonus, to give them extra like sick benefits, child care benefits. They called police officers heroes, and now a month later, they're calling them villains. So I do not hold it against any police officer that would walk off the job, because who in their right mind, Joe, would serve as an Atlanta police officer, knowing that if they actually have to defend themselves, they're going to be put potentially to death. The charges that are being brought against the police officer who killed Richard Brooks include the death penalty.
It did include that, but it also it threw CBI off, or excuse me, GBI off. So the Georgia Bureau of Investigation did not conclude their investigation at all, and the Attorney General, who is running for re-election, who by the way is also under criminal investigation for sexual misconduct against people that were in his office, decided that he was going to go rogue and charge the police officer with 11 counts. And as you said yesterday, is going to charge him with a ricochet of one of the bullets that ended up hitting the car, and then made 4 counts of that, or 3 counts of that, based upon who was occupying that car at the time the ricochet occurred. To me, it is absolutely, it's crazy we're even having this conversation. But you be careful what you ask for, because that is really what it comes down to, is that we are dealing with the sheer amount of lunacy that we're dealing with. So we're not going to charge looters. We're not going to charge rioters. We're not going to charge people that burn people's buildings. We're not going to charge any of them. We're going to charge the police officer who was fired upon by a suspect, who, by the way, resisted arrest and fought with the police officers and then ran away as they were trying to arrest him for being drunk. Like, he was over the limit. He passed out in the middle of a drive-through.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a number of things that happened that you have to pause. Like if he felt, if Brooks felt that this was wrong and it shouldn't have happened to him, he should have gone through the process. He should have gone through the process, and he didn't go through the process. Yeah.
Well, I see a lot of people mentioning that they support Blue in the comment section, and we do too. And we're putting out a T-shirt. I guess this is the next as good a time as any to say that this episode is brought to you by the Conservative Daily Store. We have a fresh new T-shirt out, very simple, thin blue line, flag on it, and it says "I back Blue." If you wanna purchase that T-shirt and help support the channel, we have that up. We have that in the description on our YouTube live stream as well as our Facebook streams. I back Blue. We're already starting to get a few orders of them, so definitely pick that up if you want to support the channel. I want to get into what we talked about yesterday.
We're going to stop here for a minute. We're going to stop here for a minute. We're going to stop. We're going to tell everyone that's actually watching this what's happening, and that is Facebook is throttling us. Right? We have lots of people.
Not last night. Last night
they didn't because they weren't looking at content. It wasn't during the day, and they didn't have an opportunity to have someone watch it and say, "Hey, we're going to throttle you." So what I need everyone to do is hit the share button and share it. Start a watch party. If the only way that we actually get truth and at least can have a conversation about this is to share it, then share it. And they're going to throttle you on your side. But
hit the share button. We're going to be going down the list of all the charges that they're bringing against this officer, and we're going to be talk about how absurd they are. So hit that share button now so that we can get this out to more people, because the mainstream media is trying to claim that the police didn't walk at all.
Share. I'm going to just say it until I see 5,000. No, I'm just kidding. I just want everyone to share it. Let's have the conversation. By the way, they can also call in 888-441-1121. So just make sure you know that as well. All right, go ahead, Max. Let's just get right into it.
So let's get right into it. Let's play. Let's go through what the insane prosecutor in Atlanta, what he said yesterday. We covered this a bit. It was on yesterday's show. It was a little bit soft, so I want to play just a brief clip of that so you can see just how insane it is. And then we're going to go down the list of the actual charges that this police officer is facing and show how ridiculous it is. Let's play cut one.
Informed that he was under arrest for driving under the influence. And this is a requirement of the Atlanta Police Department. When one is charged with DUI, the Atlanta Police Department's own procedures require that that person is informed immediatty that they are.
All right, let's pause that right
arrest.
there. So the first thing that they're going after these cops for is not technically informing Rayshard Brooks that he was under arrest. The reason that never happened is because immediately after they said, okay, put your hands behind you, and as soon as they started going through that process, he started hitting them and resisting arrest. So I just wanted to cut in there how ridiculous it is to accuse the police officers of not following the regulations. Let's keep playing that clip.
And then he was grabbed from the rear by Officer Roth, who made an attempt to physically restrain him after the 41-minute and 17-second discussion. We concluded and considered it as one of our important considerations. Mr. Brooks never presented himself as a threat. At the very beginning, he was peacefully sleeping in his car.
He wasn't sleeping, he was passed out.
He was awakened by the officer.
Let's not stop there. So to say that he never posed a threat is lunacy. He hit the officers. He brought them to the ground. He stole a weapon from the officer. And this prosecutor, Paul Howard Jr., admits that he fired the taser at the officer. To say that he never posed a threat is insane. Well, let's keep playing this. There's a couple more seconds to this clip. Let's go back to it.
Cooperative. And he was directed to move his car to another location. He calmly moved his car. Mr. Brooks was asked whether or not he had a weapon. He indicated that he did not. Without any resistance, he passed his driver's license to the officers. And the officers then asked Mr. Brooks whether or not he would consent to a pat-down or a body search. And
all right, let's cut that there. So I don't have to keep going with this. What they're trying to set the stage for is they're claiming that he was docile, that he was nice, that he didn't pose a threat, that he complied with their orders. And as you hear it, the prosecutor, Paul Howard Jr., says that he complied with orders for 41 minutes. I think he said 17 seconds.
Right.
That is irrelevant because at 41 minute 18 seconds, he then took a swing at the officers,
Right.
brought the struggle to the ground, stole their taser, ran away, and shot at them with it.
That's not important.
I feel like
Max.
I'm watching a Twilight Zone episode.
I don't even know why you want to get to the details of truth. I don't want to. Why you don't? I don't actually know what you're trying to say. I mean, why would truth even be important to you? Why is it important to anyone? Why is reality important, Max? You know what? I'm going to admonish you right now because you know what? You should not be talking about truth. You shouldn't be. Stop it. Please stop. Stop. You're hurting my feelings.
Yeah.
I'm going to go sit in the corner right now. I'm going to need a safe space. Josh, get me a safe space. I need a place to stay right now, please.
Yeah,
He just told me to get out. Get out.
Yeah, he's going through the motions in this press conference, and we're going to play
Right.
more clips of it, saying he admits that Rayshard Brooks fired a taser at the officers, and we'll get to it in a second why he says that doesn't matter. But I want to play this clip of the same prosecutor just 2 weeks ago announcing that the city was going to indict a police officer for using a taser against a protester.
Right.
And I want you to look at the language, listen to the language that the same prosecutor uses to describe the taser just 2 weeks ago. Let's go to cut 2.
The second officer is Willie Sauls and charged with aggravated assault of Ms. Pilgrim, and this is for pointing a taser at Mrs. Pilgrim. And as many of you all know, under Georgia law, a taser is considered as a deadly weapon under Georgia law.
So I want to be absolutely clear. 2 weeks ago, this prosecutor recommended charges, aggravated assault charges, against another officer simply for pointing a taser at someone, not even for firing it. He said aggravated assault is justified for pointing a taser at someone because a taser under Georgia law is considered a deadly weapon. And yet, in this case, when police officers have a taser pointed at them and actually fired, he says that Rayshard Brooks posed no threat. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Maybe, Joe, he wished that we wouldn't find that clip from 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But he's a complete hypocrite here.
Yep. But I think that can be used, those two things can be used in conjunction with each other in order to make sure that he is acquitted, right? The problem with acquittal is that the same thing's going to happen. We're going to see him get acquitted, and after he's acquitted, we're going to have to deal with the repercussions of criminals actually going out and looting and setting fire. So I'm going to tell you right now that everyone needs to go out and exercise their Second Amendment right and make sure that they are in a position where they can safely defend their family, because the truth does not mean anything anymore to anyone. It just it doesn't mean anything. Truth is ambiguous. It's as ambiguous as, a shade of gray. Like
I loved it last night where the Atlanta PD was saying we are not experiencing a police walkout. That is not happening. Though we are experiencing an above average number of officers calling in sick. Of course, the Atlanta Police Department didn't put out a press release that entire stations were empty because officers walked out of the job. Could you imagine the mayhem if Atlanta had admitted to it?
The union leader actually this morning on the news said that yes, they had staged a walkout of sorts. Sick out.
But the mainstream media and the
lied.
Atlanta PD and the Atlanta mayor's office lied and claimed it wasn't happening. Now, I understand the consequences that would have happened if they had said there are no police on duty tonight. Like that city would have burned to the ground. If everyone knew that was happening, it would have burned to the ground.
No, there'd have been a lot.
So I understand
people.
It from that perspective. But to go out of their way and basically say no, this is completely false. They were lying to the people. They were lying to people, and they made people expect that the police would be there to protect them. I listened to we streamed this last night for 2 hours before the mayor finally found someone to man the dispatch, and then we shut it down. But for 2 hours last night, longer than that, the dispatch airways were complete dead air.
Late at night.
Static.
Late at night.
Yeah. And there were calls coming in. Basically, I think they were using code 12. I might be mistaken, but they were using a code to basically say there's no available officers. no available officers because no officers were willing to respond to it. I don't blame them. I don't blame the LAPD, which we're hearing now that there are police officers that are walking out there, or at least going with the blue flu. They're calling out sick. LA just announced that they're cutting 125 million from their police department. They're defunding the police. And the first thing to go was overtime for police officers. So if police officers aren't going to get overtime, do you think they're going to put their lives on the line? Of course not. Of course not. And we're seeing it in New York where the NYPD is removing officers from DA's offices because the DA is not prosecuting rioters. Why would the PD protect the DA?
Yeah. You don't want to protect them, we don't protect you.
Why? Yeah.
But there's another reality here that we should probably talk about, and that is be careful what you ask for. Be careful what you ask for. You want to make the police a demon? You want to demonize them when they put their life on the line every single day? They've created a narrative that you would think happens just carte blanche every day. Police are out there just terrorizing people. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening.
It's not.
99.5% of the interactions that happen with 99% of the officers happen because you broke a law. Now, we can argue that some of those laws shouldn't exist, right? That some of the things that they are told that they have to do on a regular basis that may or may not align to quota and creating revenue for themselves, maybe that stuff shouldn't exist. Maybe. We can have that discussion, right?
Yeah.
But to sit here and say that police are out there just attacking the citizens as a whole, that's just a part of what they do as people is wrong. And 330 million people in the United States, and they can come up with probably 800, 1,000, maybe 2,000 videos of police acting inappropriately. This is almost like COVID. There's 330 million people.
They can point to millions of police interactions a year that go by the book where people might be shot, but it's completely legitimate shoot. I want to play the clip because we're gonna keep going through this press conference and we're gonna pick it apart. I want to though play the clip. We played it a couple of days ago. This is the clip of the actual shooting itself, and I want to show it, and then we zoom in and we slow it down at the moment that Rayshard Brooks fired his taser at the officers.
Which is when the officers fired too.
Yep, so there you can see the blast. See that little puff of smoke? That's the act of the taser being fired, and the officer fired immediately after, probably 2 or 3 steps after that taser shot was fired at him. Right. Now, we'll get into this, but the prosecutor is claiming that the officer was never in any risk because he's gone back, he's looked at the still frames, and he's realized that the taser barbs would have flown over the officer's head, and therefore he has no reason to be afraid at all, and that he had no reason to be afraid for his life. I want to play this, and we'll stop in the middle of it and talk about it. But this is him trying to explain and trying to measure out the distance between them as a way to explain away their pending indictments. Let's go to cut 4.
Mr. Brooks, who was firing a taser as well, but I don't know if you can see it clearly. The prongs from the taser were actually fired above Officer Roth's head. I'd like for you to also look at the...
This guy is so unintelligent.
...of Officer Roth and Mr. Brooks, that they are here next to this red automobile. If we look at the next photograph, we'll see that the positions of both parties, they've changed. Mr. Brooks has now moved away from his original position, and we estimate the distance is probably about 12 feet. And Officer Roth has moved about 10 feet from the position in what is our exhibit number 1. This second video or second still shows the very instance that the shot was fired into the back.
Oh, let's cut that there. So
Kathleen
what
says
he's
no
saying.
Audio. Can they hear us? Can everyone hear us?
Yeah, people can hear us. People are commenting.
Okay, all right.
Turn up your volume. If you can't hear anything, there's a little volume button. Yeah, people are responding to us, so I assume people can hear us. What this prosecutor is saying, Joe, is he admits that the taser was shot at the officer. We've played the clip of that prosecutor admitting that a taser just being pointed at someone is aggravated assault. Rayshard Brooks, whatever you think about whether he should have been arrested, whether he should have died, whatever you think about it, he committed aggravated assault against that officer the minute that he turned around, pointed the taser at him. Don't even talk about fired it, pointing it at him. When he says that, 10 feet, they moved 10 feet, that's what, 3 steps in a full run? This officer, his heart is beating. He just had a shot fired at him. He might not even know what exactly was fired at him.
He did, and he could have.
He just wants to go home at night.
Right.
He just wants to go home.
We can go back to the fact that if Brooks would have not done one of 10 different things, wouldn't have driven to the Wendy's, wouldn't have passed out in the drive-through
lane.
If he wouldn't have been drinking and been over the legal limit and been subject to a DUI, if he wouldn't have fought with the police officer, if he wouldn't have stole the taser, if he wouldn't have fired the taser, we want to basically say that looters and rioters, you don't are responsible for anything. Accountability? Why? Why would I allow you to be accountable? Why? But we're going to hold this police officer who every single day has to go out there and deal with bad people. See, we're in that place where we don't have to deal with bad people every day. We can make a choice that, hey, I don't have to deal with a bad person. But a police officer doesn't get that benefit. 95% of the time when they actually engage with someone, it's because that person is doing something wrong. And many times they have to deal with the dregs of society. They have to see the worst in people at the worst possible moment. Just imagine if every single day that you went to work, you had to deal with the worst of the worst in people. I didn't say the people were bad. I'm sure Brooks was a great guy, right? I don't know him. I'm just assuming he was. But he was at his worst. He was not at his best. At his best.
Oh, he was absolutely.
At his best.
He was absolutely not at his best.
Is not passing out at Wendy's. At his best is not getting drunk and driving. We don't want to talk about, nobody's coming out and saying, hey, what about all the kids that died and the moms that died and the dads that died because of drunk drivers? We don't want to talk about that. We want to let this guy, we want to basically excuse that. Hey, it's okay that you were impaired behind the wheel. It's okay you passed out in the middle of a drive-through. It's okay that you beat on cops and stole their taser. We're going to forget all of that stuff that led to ultimately you being shot and killed. You caused your own death. I'm sorry, you did. And look,
so let's talk about what this prosecutor is expecting police officers to do. He mentions that they're 18 feet apart. The reason he does that is because the distance for the taser reliably is 15 feet. So the reason he's saying they're 18 feet apart is to insinuate that the officer couldn't have been harmed by the taser. It's dark. They're in a full sprint.
Right.
To think that this officer can differentiate between 15, 12, 18 feet in the dark in a parking lot when he's being shot at is ridiculous.
Right.
It is ridiculous.
Right.
It is unrealistic.
Right.
To say that the officer should have known the trajectory of the taser shot is to suggest that the officer, while he's in full sprint, trying to apprehend a suspect and dodge shots, should also be doing trigonometry to figure out the trajectory so he can basically envision like a triangle, so he can envision the hypotenuse of that triangle, right? Okay, if it's 18 feet between us and the shot is at this difference, it's a basic trig equation. Right? But that's not what officers have to do. It is not reasonable to expect any person to do that.
Right.
With the exception of maybe a savant would be able to do it. No common citizen, no police officer could possibly do the trigonometric equations to determine that the trajectory won't hit me. He's this far away. It's unreasonable. But now they're going back and they're doing Monday morning quarterback and they're freezing the still frame to say, oh, well, technically, since you fired the shot 2.5 steps after you were fired upon, you should have known. They're also saying that the cop should have known that when he fired that taser, that there were no shots left in it, because the taser can only be fired twice.
Right.
If I'm chasing and I'm getting shot at, I'm not counting how many bullets are in the magazine of the gun that's being shot at me. That is an unrealistic expectation.
Well, there's another part to this too, that we should talk about just the lack of justice in the justice system and lack of accountability, which I think ultimately lies on the DA's office and the judges. I think it builds a system, right, that allows for the ethos or culture of bad police officers to get away with what they get away with, right? Because there's no question they hide evidence, right? They've been accused of hiding evidence. You don't hide evidence if you're not supporting bad police officers. So we have a systemic problem, right, that allows for black people to actually get get sentenced at 3.9 times the sentence of a white person. That's a problem. Right?
I don't even want to get into that, Joe.
No, I do want to get into it. I do want to get into it.
We're not getting into that today.
No, hold
right
on.
now, a police
No.
officer is facing the
Max,
death penalty.
I'm going to
He was
finish.
shot at,
I'm going to
and he's
finish.
facing the death penalty
I'm
because
gonna
he shot
finish.
back. I'm not getting into
I'm gonna finish.
whether or not black people go to prison
yes,
more
you
than
are.
white people.
Yes, you are. You're
No,
going
we're
to
not.
get. No, I'm going to
We're talking
finish.
about this officer. We're talking about how officers are being vilified for absolutely no reason.
Shut up,
We're
Max.
not getting
I
into
need to have,
justice and policing.
I'm going to finish this. My issue with it and why I went to the DA and the judges, because you don't ever let me finish, so just stop it, is the fact that, frankly, they wanted to hold him without bond. They're holding him without bond. So they're basically saying that you're a police officer and you know we're going to find you guilty of capital murder, but they're also in that position saying, and we're going to get our pound of flesh. We know that this is a political stunt, but we're going to get our pound of flesh and we're going to make sure that you are held in a jail cell with people that you've probably arrested so that we can get our pound of flesh. We can make it look like optically that we're for the rioters and looters. The amount of injustice inside of a system that is supposed to be for justice on every angle is actually the problem. It's the problem. You want to have the other guy on a $500,000 bond when you have people in New York that are accused of sexual crimes that are being let out on bond for $500 or on your own recognizance. I mean, to me, the entire system is failing the American people, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I don't. That's true, but this isn't about the system today. This is about one cop who is being now facing the death penalty because a deadly weapon under Georgia law was fired at him, and it is being determined to be unreasonable for him to defend himself.
But we all agree.
A
We all agree
ridiculous
with
standard.
that. But what I'm saying is that they do apply a ridiculous standard. We all agreed they imply a ridiculous standard. But I also just want to look at the lunacy of every decision that's made by leadership. At some point, we've got to get rid of these leaders. We've got to start looking at and identifying the problem and stop concentrating on the symptom. And it's always the symptom. Always.
This guy's up for re-election. Part of the reason that this prosecutor is doing this is because he's facing a tough primary fight.
Right.
So he wants to appear
100%.
tough on crime, not criminals. He wants to appear tough on the police.
Right.
That's absolutely a part of this. I want to play, and we'll cut in and out of this. This is the prosecutor explaining the charges that are going to be put against this one officer. I mean, actually, they're charging both officers. And the news that he broke yesterday that one officer had turned state witness was a lie. That officer's lawyer has come out and said that was a total lie. So this prosecutor was lying on the stand in this press conference. But let's play cut 5 and let's go through the charges and we'll stop and explain why each one is ludicrous.
So these are the charges that we have had filed today, signed by one of our Superior Court judges. These are the 11 charges against Officer Roth. The first charge is felony murder. This is a death that is as a result of a underlying felony, and in this case, the underlying felony is aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and the possible sentences.
The reason that they are charging him with felony assault is because they're saying it was a felony for that cop to defend himself and to shoot Rayshard Brooks.
Right.
That is why he's being charged with felony murder. It's not just murder; it's felony murder because it was murder in the underlying commission of a felony. They are actually branding self-defense as murder.
Well, you remember what happened in Albuquerque? Guys hit with a skateboard while they're yelling, "I'm going to kill you! I'm going to kill you!" Not once but twice, hitting him with the metal end of a truck, which is my son skateboarded at one point, and I think he still does. Actually, I know he still does. But with the metal part of the skateboard, aiming for his head, he gets shot. They don't charge any of those people. And they charge him. They charged him for protecting himself.
Yeah.
People
are saying that the tape isn't loud enough. The tape's as loud as we can get it, so turn up your volume. And that's why we're kind of explaining what he's saying. Yeah, no, that guy in Albuquerque was not only hit with a skateboard, he was also hit by 3 people on the ground at the same time. Absolutely, but they branded that as some kind of murder felon. They're trying to say that he broke the law. He had no right to self-defense either. Let's go back to the clip and hear the next charges, because it gets worse. That's not even the worst part. Yeah, he faces the death penalty, but they're throwing the book at him. So Let's keep going. Let's go back to cut 5.
For a felony murder conviction would be life without parole, or the death penalty. Now, he's also charged in the arrest warrant with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and this is a count charging him for the shooting of Mr. Brooks, and the possible sentence for aggravated assault is 1 to 20 years. The third aggravated assault account is for the shooting towards or in the direction of Mr. Melvin Evans. Mr. Evans was the person who was seated in the car.
So he's talking about, they're also charging him with aggravated assault because he shot Rayshard Brooks. But the third charge is aggravated assault because one of the bullets missed the target and hit a quarter panel of a car in the parking lot. And he's charging him with aggravated assault for the driver in the car. Let's go back to the clip because it gets even more insane than that. Let's go back to it.
The picture of And if you would point out, this automobile is the place that Mr. Evans and his 2 companions were driving, and a shot was fired. And I believe we've also got a photo of the shot that ended up in the vehicle. I think you got to stand it up.
It's as crooked as their sign. Whole thing's crooked.
And so with count 4 against Miss Officer Roth, it charges him with aggravated assault for firing the weapon in or in the direction of Danielle Killians, who was in the passenger side of the front seat of the car. Next slide. Count 5 is an aggravated assault.
This guy's
charge.
a clown.
And this was a charge for shooting towards or in the direction of Michael Perkins. Mr. Perkins was seated in the rear of this same vehicle.
So I want to be absolutely clear. This cop is now facing 3 additional aggravated assault charges because one of the bullets either ricocheted or just missed and hit a car. They are charging him with 1 count for every person in the car. This is insane. A police officer had a deadly weapon pointed at him and fired at him. He responded with appropriate force, and they are throwing the book at him so much to actually charge him with aggravated assault because one of the bullets hit a car, didn't actually hurt anyone in the car, but it hit a car that people were in. This is absolutely insane. What do you think of the show?
I think that I find it amusing. I don't find it amusing. I don't find any of this amusing. I find it disgusting, but that it hit the bumper. And if anybody knows what a bullet hole looks like, right, on a hollow point, that's not what it would look like, right? So it actually is
it came in sideways.
Yeah, so it's an obvious ricochet, right? And I think that's what they said originally. It was a ricochet, but it is as if they're fishing. They just want to build more and more and more. This is what they call charge stacking, by the way, right? This is one of the issues that I have is if somebody does something wrong, you charge them with that crime. You don't try to stack 20 things on top of it so you can get them to take a plea deal. That's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is this police officer needs to fight it all the way through. But, you know, I just find it's sad. It's a sad day in America. It's a sad day in America. It's a sad day when we can't have real, honest communication and conversations. We just can't. It's a sad day.
I don't want to go back to the clip because it's hard to hear, and it's pretty easy to explain. I'll explain the rest of it. They're also charging the officer with basically not following police department guidelines for using a taser on a suspect that was fleeing. Now, that's also BS because the guidelines say that you can't shoot someone who's fleeing. But if that suspect has a deadly weapon and you fear that that suspect will use that weapon to hurt you, kill you, or hurt anyone else, then yes, you are allowed to use force against the suspect. So when they say that he was shot in the back and there was no reason for it, that's a lie because by their own admission, the suspect was carrying a weapon. And it is not up to the officer to try and guess how many shots were left in that magazine. It's unreasonable to expect him to know that. It's unreasonable. So they're going after him for that. They're going after him for kicking. They said that he allegedly kicked Rayshard Brooks when he was on the ground. They want to put him away for 20 years. If none of this sticks, they want him to go away for 20 years because they kicked him. He kicked him while he was on the ground. They also want to go after him for not rendering timely medical assistance. He waited 2 minutes after the shot was fired before he rendered medical aid, which, okay, from a Monday morning quarterback perspective, maybe that's a long time. But you have to understand what's going through this officer's head. He just had a weapon fired at him. He just had to discharge his weapon. It is not unreasonable for him to miss that window, for him to take a couple extra seconds before rendering aid to the person who just tried to kill him. Yeah, in an ideal world, as soon as a police officer shoots someone, they'd be down there immediately helping them. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where someone passes out drunk in a drive-thru, and within 40 minutes, he's trying to kill the officer who was arresting him. That's the world we live in. We don't live in a perfect world.
Right. So I want to go to the and I just had somebody actually send me a message that started talking about the assault and battery, aggravated assault, crimes against a person. And I want to read this. This is from the 2010 Georgia Code, Title 16, Chapter 5, Article 2. I know this is probably getting too deep, but it says a person commits the offense of aggravated assault when he or she assaults one, with intent to murder, to rape, or to rob, with a deadly weapon or with an object, device, or instrument which, when used offensively against a person, is likely or actually does result in seriously bodily injury. He did not use it in an offensive manner. He used it in a defensive manner, right?
Yeah.
Persons without legal justification by discharging a firearm from within a motor vehicle toward a person or persons. He didn't do that either.
No, he didn't do that.
Except as provided in subsection C through K of this code section, a person convicted of the offense of aggravated assault shall be punished by imprisoning for not less than 1 nor more than 20 years. And if you read through this, I can't find one thing, and I'll actually put this up. I'll put this up in the comment section so you can see it and you can read it. I can't find one part of this that actually he would be guilty of. This is the travesty that we're up against, is that they've created a political circus that nullifies the integrity of the office that they hold. This nullifies it. And you could say that there's a problem, there's a systemic issue that we face in our country. That is why President Trump signed off on a bill to do police reform. He did that. He signed an executive order. He did those things. So, but I can't find anything that would allow for them to charge this police officer. I can't find anything. I keep looking at it and going, all right, so he didn't show up at that and say, all right, I know that this guy is actually inside of a drive-through. I know he's blocking it. He's asleep, quote unquote asleep. He's completely innocent, and I just want to ruin this guy's night. That's not what happened. During the 41 minutes, what the DA failed to say is that the police officer was also cordial, respectful to Brooks. The police officer didn't act like a jerk. He didn't act like an ass. He didn't do any of that. He tried to de-escalate the situation. As the situation escalated, he tried to de-escalate it to the point where Brooks made bad decisions and put himself in a position that ultimately cost him his life. No one wants him to lose his life. No one. No one wants anybody to die.
So those 11 charges that we just went through are for Garrett Rolfe, the officer that actually fired the gun.
Yes.
They're also charging the other police officer
Right.
Let me find his name. Devin Brosnan. They're
Right.
charging him with aggravated assault because after he, Mr. Producer, we got to find a way to mute that.
We can hear you.
They're also charging Devin Brosnan with aggravated assault because in an attempt to stop Rayshard Brooks from making any other effort to kill them, he put one foot on his shoulder blade when he was on the ground to make sure he didn't get up. The prosecutor accused him of standing on Rayshard Brooks. That is a lie. The image that they showed was him putting one foot, almost like a Captain Morgan stance, on his shoulder blade. The officer claims he was on his arm, but they are charging the other officer with aggravated assault because he stood on Rayshard Brooks. We got to find a way to mute that because you're on the air.
All right, we've
Josh.
we got someone. I don't know how he's on the air, but he is on the air. We have somebody on the phone.
A troll trying to get through.
No. This isn't a troll. It's someone that wants to talk about why people vote Democrat. He's on. Say hello.
Hi. I just have one question. I'm not a troll, I promise. I stand with police officers. I just want to know, in these major cities where the DAs are Democrat, the mayors are Democrats, the senators are Democrats, people that believe in systematic racism, they want change, right?
Right.
Then why don't they vote Republicans in? Why don't they take the Democrats out
Exactly.
and have done zero for them and vote the Republicans in?
Well, let me
why
ask
do
you.
they keep voting the same people over and over again?
Let me ask you another. Let me ask you another question.
The last time I'll let you go, Joe. The last time the Republican was a mayor in Atlanta was 1879. That's the last time they had a Republican mayor. Go ahead, Joe.
Right. So here's the issue, right? And I want to look at it from a Republican standpoint and a Democrat standpoint. Does it really matter what football team they play on if they have ethical value and they stand up for the people? I think the issue is that there's a lack of leadership. And there's been, and by the way, this is systemic in the Democrat environment. It's systemic because we keep electing people that are eroding these communities, right? That, by the way, want to blame it on police. It's not the police's fault. It's the ethos. It's the culture that they've created in the city that allows for them to systematically persecute blacks, Hispanics, and minorities and hold them down in a place where they become a part of a machine that generates revenue and generates opportunity for them specifically. But why are Republicans not talking about those issues as well, right? Why does this have to be one football team over another? Why can't it be an American thing? Why can't it be I want to elect this person, hey, it's independent because I like what they stand for and the amount of courage that they have in standing up for the people of the community?
The reason that it's not a football team, but the reason that I love the question is because you look at generations. There's not a single person alive today who was alive when there was a Republican mayor in Atlanta.
Right.
The last person alive to experience a Republican mayor probably died 70 years ago. If you go through by the numbers, the last person to actually live under a Republican mayor in Atlanta, give or take, they died 70 years ago. Entire generations have come and gone without any Republican in control. So I agree to say that there's systemic racism in somewhere like Atlanta. I don't want to hear that argument because the people making the argument made up the system for as long as anyone can remember. So you're absolutely right.
The same people over and over again.
They do. You're absolutely right. And the reality is, and Max, I'm sorry, I will disagree with you that there is systemic racism in the United States because there is. Right? I mean, I truly believe but I believe that the people in positions of power and authority in these Democrat-controlled environments are not operating in the best interest of the people in their community. They're just not. And they keep voting them back in, frankly, because they're being told that it's this propaganda machine. You have to vote for a Democrat. You have to vote for a Democrat. Vote for a Democrat. Vote blue. Vote blue. Vote blue. Vote blue. And they're putting themselves in a position where they're eroding their community and they're actually shooting themselves at the same time that they're being told that this will help them. Right? Well, they're blaming Republicans. There's not a Republican for miles around that's been voted into any of those environments, yet they keep voting for these people.
Exactly. I don't understand it, but thank you for answering the question, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanhanks for calling.
All right, thanks for the call. Yeah, if anyone else wants to call in, our number is 888-441-1121. We are getting a lot of trolls trying to call in. I guess that's a sign that we made it.
And we're doing good things, right? We're doing good things. And again, this comes down to the weaponization of technology, and we haven't talked about this yet, but at some point we should probably in the next couple of days talk about what Google is doing to the Federalist and other conservative environments. But Max, I want you to tell everyone really quick that we started this organization 13 years ago, right? And we've unselfishly not just gone after Democrats, have we?
No, we go after everyone. We go after Republicans. We go after Democrats, Independents. There is no one that we will lay off from.
Even the president.
For conservative. Yeah, even the president. Like when Trump does things with things like bump stocks and other thing, we call him out too. When he doesn't fulfill promises, we call him out too. We fight for conservative ideals. We do not accept any cowardice or any backstabbing from any party.
So, and I want to be really clear. There's a couple things that we don't do at Conservative Daily, and I founded this organization 13 years ago, and we don't do, and I don't care how you feel about this. I'm just going to tell you right now what we don't do. We don't do anti-gay. We don't do it. We don't do anti-Muslim. We don't do it. Those are things now we unapologetically say that we are pro-life, 100%.
Yes.
So when we talk about conservative ideals, we separate out things that we accept you where you are, not where we want you to be. And on the religious side, when we're talking about religious freedoms, there's if you trace it back, and this is kind of this is almost where you play the music like, oh, this is getting too in depth. When you talk about Muslims, Christians, and Jews, it all comes from Abrahamic faith, and ultimately we can have our disagreements on what's the true religion, what's the true God, but I don't. That's not my fight, right? That's God's fight, and so we get to the point where there's things that we are willing to stand for, not willing to stand for, and I'm not willing to attack my brother or my sister based on their sexual orientation. I'm just not willing to do it.
But there's a very distinct difference is that we do support things like the travel ban. We reject the notion 100%. that is a Muslim ban. We reject that notion entirely. 100%. We do oppose the most recent Supreme Court ruling from the past week saying that when the Civil Rights Act was passed, that Congress had protecting transgender individuals in mind when they passed a law to protect women in the workplace. We reject that. We reject that entirely. Now, we're not going to deal with that issue at all, but to see the Supreme Court and other courts have activist judicial rulings from the bench, we oppose that. So there are ways that we do still stand up on these issues without making it personal attacks. Right. I want to switch gears briefly because we're getting towards the end of the show. Something happened today that I am absolutely livid. We would have probably done a whole show. We'll probably do a show on this tomorrow, but we had to do this just because this is the cop stuff in Atlanta is just beyond the pale what's happening. But the Supreme Court today, to anyone who doesn't know, they rejected President Trump's argument that Barack Obama's amnesty executive order should be rescinded. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but the basic premise of this is Congress passed a law many years ago saying that it is illegal, unlawful for an illegal alien to work in the United States. It is unlawful. Unless that person entered the United States legally, they cannot work here. Barack Obama decided out of thin air that he was not going to enforce that law. Not only that, but he was going to start sending out work permits to these people, as well as social security numbers to let them work in the United States. That was unlawful. It was unconstitutional. When Donald Trump took office, he decided to rescind that order. And the reason he gave was it was unlawful, it was unconstitutional. For 3 years, they've been fighting this in the court, and the Supreme Court just ruled that Donald Trump has to continue implementing Barack Obama's amnesty executive order because, quote, Trump didn't give a good enough reason, end quote, to suspend it. Also, the Supreme Court says that he has not taken into account the, quote, hardship, end quote, that illegal aliens would face if that program was suspended. This is the most disgusting ruling I've seen in my lifetime, at least, because it is literally legislating from the bench. It is saying that what Barack Obama could do by executive order, Donald Trump cannot undo by executive order. It is disgusting that we've gotten to this point, but what is even more disgusting is that the very Republicans who have spent, 6 years promising to undo this program if the Supreme Court didn't do it for them, they are now backing amnesty. They're now supporting a Democrat plan to enshrine Barack Obama's program into law. It is disgusting. So, Joe, when you say that we oppose Republicans as well as Democrats, we do. The Republicans are stabbing conservatives in the back. They promised to shut this down if the Supreme Court didn't do it. They're trying to cement it into law.
No, they are stabbing Americans in the back. They are stabbing Americans. They are putting others above Americans. They are putting you and I. And look, we can't help the fact that we were born in the United States. We can't help that. There's a process. If you want to, again, this gets to the symptom and the problem, right? If you want to address the symptom, address the problem. But creating these patchwork of Band-Aids, right, and doing things and justifying how you can basically rewrite or nullify the Constitution and the laws of our land, it just, to me, it falls on the face of just spitting in the faces of the Americans and spitting in the face of those that have sacrificed their lives to protect this country. And frankly, to protect other countries out there as well.
Yeah. Whenever a president takes the oath of office, they're required to swear that they will faithfully execute the laws of the United States. Barack Obama took that oath. And then when he saw the law saying that illegal aliens aren't allowed to live and work here, he decided to violate that oath. And instead of enforcing the law against them, decided he was not going to enforce that law. And he was going to turn a blind eye and actually encourage his administration to send them work permits. Donald Trump is trying to faithfully execute the laws of these United States. He's trying to enforce the law that says you cannot live or work here if you're an illegal alien.
Correct.
The Supreme Court just ordered the President of the United States to continue ignoring the law, to basically not honor his oath, and to let illegal aliens continue living and working here. What the Supreme Court just did is unconscionable. It is the definition of judicial activism. To say that this is allowed to keep going because of some bureaucratic technicality and they didn't provide a good enough reason for wanting to do it, and they didn't take the hardship of illegal aliens into account. Joe, what about the hardship of Americans? We just learned today that while the number of new unemployment filings is decreasing week to week, there are now 45.7 million Americans who are out of work, unemployed. Talk about that, because what the Supreme Court just said is that up to 1.7 million illegal aliens must be given work permits. So we have 45.7 million Americans out of work as of this morning.
Right.
The Supreme Court is ordering the president to give work permits to illegal aliens. And Joe, I've talked about this on the podcast before. My wife, when she was a teacher, we've talked about that. We don't have to dive into it. But when she applied for a teaching position in an inner city school, she was competing against illegal aliens. 1 in every 8 DACA recipients, amnesty recipients, they work a white-collar job. The other 7 work blue-collar jobs. These are not people in the fields picking crops. These are people with high school and college degrees who have lived in this country illegally. To say that the president needs to not only ignore the law, but start sending out work permits to 1.7 million, up to 1.7 million illegals to then compete with Americans for jobs. I'll say it again, it is unconscionable. It is unconscionable that Democrats want this. It is unconscionable that Republicans want this to serve their corporate donors. It is unconscionable.
Well, we're living in a very, very, very different society today than we ever have. It's a different society. It's a different society. What's right is wrong. What's wrong is right. There's not a whole lot of sensibility to it. Yeah, I mean, Max, I wish I could tell you that I think that it'll get better before it gets worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's going to get worse.
But we do have to wake up. We do have to wake up and have a conversation and make sure that the conversation, frankly, is centered around Americans, right? And centered around fact. But there's so much propaganda that we're dealing with, and we have a weaponization of media. We have a weaponization of platforms, of technology, right? And when they literally are squeezing the lifeblood out of reality, out of truth, and they're replacing it with illogical things that, frankly, are designed. If I was on the outside looking at this, and I was in another country, I would say you're being sabotaged by the same people you're trying to help around the world. They're coming in and they're becoming citizens in your country, and they're literally destroying the fiber of America. They're doing everything that they told you that they would do 4, 5, 6 decades ago.
Yeah.
They're eroding the fiber of the greatest nation on earth.
We haven't even had a chance to talk about this because there's so much going on. But this week, the United Nations is holding meetings and hearings on racism in the United States, on police brutality in the United States.
Right.
The UN Human Rights Council is holding hearings. Usually these are reserved for ethnic cleansing and genocide as a precursor for UN involvement. The Floyd family is encouraging the UN to intervene in the United States. The ACLU is encouraging the UN to intervene in the United States. We haven't even had a chance to talk about this.
These are,
so much going
I'm telling you, there is a plight. There is a plight of people that came to this country, right, to seek a better life, that are here now to destroy everything that we have as a country. And do you know who the pawns are in all this? Americans. Americans, generational Americans that have been here are the pawns in this game to destroy everything that we represent. They're the ones that literally want to destroy us from the inside. They are coming into our country. They are trying to whitewash our history. They are trying to divide us as people. They are coming in from outside of this country. They are doing that. And they are taking up a role in, hey, listen, we don't want them to be great. We want to weaken them. So let's have the military. You can't yell at them when they go to boot camp. You can't do that. You must wear a helmet. You must bubble wrap yourself. You know what? You should eat Tide Pods. That's what you should do. Right?
Don't recommend that. We'll get taken down by Facebook for recommending that people eat cleaning solutions.
Yeah,
you can't do that.
Okay, that's my point is that people from the outside are eroding us as a country from the inside. We're allowing it to happen. We're allowing it to happen.
Even if we didn't have outsiders, we still have insiders.
We'd have insiders, but we'd have a whole lot less of them trying to walk in and say that taking a statue down is actually important when kids at school are now graduating at a 17% rate in some areas with a with a total education of 6th grade. While we hand out opportunities for kids that come here from other places and people that come from other places to get free education and free food and free housing and free. While there are people that have lived here their entire lives for generations that are generationally poor, that have generationally got caught in a place where there's no opportunity. And we don't care about them. We virtue signal and say we care about them, but we don't. We don't care about the people in America. That should be the slogan of every Democrat that's running. We don't care about Americans. You need to bleed your heart out for someone else. Let's bring the United Nations in. The U.S. doesn't know how to run anything. Let's bring the UN in. Let's have them run the U.S. into a hole. Let's weaken them as a country while other countries get stood up. Other countries do more. We attack our own. We take money from the outside. We allow people from the outside our country to tell us as Americans what we should think, what we should feel, how we should do things. It's sickening. It's sickening. Yeah. And yet we don't even realize it. It's so obvious. It's so obvious.
Yeah, it really is. And we're going to have to find a way to fit that whole UN bit into the next couple of days. There's just so much going on. It's hard to actually fit everything in. But any final words, Joe? We've touched on a lot today. We've touched on police use of force.
I thought we were going to go an extra hour, but
we can if you're available.
I'm available for a little bit here. I mean, we can continue talking about it for a little bit, maybe take a couple more callers, talk about maybe what the solutions are. We always talk about what's broken, and I'm a firm believer that we have to start getting to what's not broken. Like what is not broken fundamentally? What's not broken? And I think that that's a harder thing to actually concentrate on as people. Like, what can we say is going well? Well, I mean, just think about it. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about all the bad stuff. Yeah. That's all they inundate us with. There are things that we are doing as a society which are very, very good. They're good things.
Yeah.
Police reform is a good thing.
The good things that we have are foundational, right?
Yeah. 100%.
The rights that are protected by the Bill of Rights, not the rights that are given to us. The rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights are pre-existing natural rights, and the Bill of Rights just exists to make sure that it doesn't get left up to chance, that government understands they can't violate those rights. Your First Amendment rights are a good thing, despite what the Democrats say to the opposite. Your Second Amendment rights, your right to defend yourself, not just as an individual, but also as a police officer. We talk about police use of force, but that officer in this case in Atlanta, he is also a citizen. He has just as much self-defense rights as everyone else. He doesn't give those self-defense rights up when he puts on a uniform.
Right.
That is still good. The right to privacy is still good. The problem is when you depart from those foundational principles and you get so far beyond what the founders intended. When you start looking in and as we talked about earlier, where the Supreme Court's saying, oh yeah, well, when Congress decided that women shouldn't be discriminated in the workplace, they actually intended to protect sexual orientation. That is a ridiculous argument, right? As you depart, the Civil Rights Act is a great piece of legislation.
Correct.
You go through the history. We have
Correct.
great pieces of legislation. We have this. We have the Bill of Rights. We have the Constitution. It's as you depart from it, as you bastardize these great principles, as you try and read between the lines and find protections and things that don't exist, that is when you fall off course, right? The minute that prosecutor in Atlanta decided that what he said 2 weeks earlier about a taser being a deadly weapon, that's not true anymore. That is the example of it, right? Georgia law says it's a deadly weapon. He has decided not to interpret it that way, right? The law is still sound. It's the idiots like that who are departing from it and reinterpreting it for their own agendas.
Yeah, and this is the two-forked, very weak leadership that represents us across the nation. It really is. That fundamentally that we can justify justice. It's a justification of justice. It's a justification of the laws. It's a justification of if this, then that. But, and we used to say that if you had to explain away it with a what if or a how come, you're probably not right. You're probably not concentrating on the fundamentals of that particular law or that particular environment or that particular purpose. That, I mean, if you have to justify why you're doing something and as an end around of why you're doing it, you're probably not ethically standing on the right side of history. You're just not. And right now we are spending an awful amount of time whitewashing our country and stripping us of our identity. It's terrible. It's terrible. We're letting it happen. Marty said, we got to stop talking and start doing. Marty, you're right. You're absolutely right. So there's a movement out there, Max. We should probably tell you about this. There's a movement out there called FEC United, right? And like every other organization, it's out there to start the doing and not do the anyway. So there's
talking.
Do the talking. So that particular movement is going to be moving in a direction of an FEC Colorado. Let me just tell you what Colorado is, where it started. And it's faith, education, and commerce, right? So concentrating on empowering businesses, so empowering businesses to get the opportunity to have a voice collectively. Because organizations out there like Chamber of Commerce, they're anemic at best. They don't stand up for what businesses actually need. They only listen to big pharma and other big organizations while using these organizations that are supposed to represent businesses in the community, using them as networking events. So if you work for Amway, great place to hang out, right? But it doesn't have a whole lot of strength in what they're able to accomplish collectively. The second of which is education. We've talked about this before. We ignore the most important part of our society, right? We ignore it. We don't look at it as the greatest gift that's ever been given to us, and that's our children. Like on the education side, we have got to do more to foster bravery and courage and innovation within our school systems, but we don't. We teach them to be fearful. We teach them to be afraid of things they can't see. We teach them to be divided. We teach them to, at the same time, to accept others, to bully people, and to represent an agenda. And if they don't like what is being told to them, that they can attack those people collectively. So we have a problem on the education side, and parents don't have a voice. Common Core and Bill Gates, a guy that frankly doesn't have the experience, is injecting himself into the lives of every American. He's like the big mad scientist. And the third part is faith. Now, I didn't say churches, I said faith. Why do churches? We talked about this before. I read it. Right? Did I read it about churches and the fact that they used to be an effective part of society? They used to be the barometer for our communities, but there is no barometer for our communities anymore. They don't stand up. They go with the status quo. And that no more has that become evident than what we're seeing during this quote unquote pandemic. They don't have a voice. They're not feeding their flock. It doesn't matter what religion we're talking about. They fail to stand up and act as leaders with courage. Courage is infectious as fear, and we are letting fear envelop, and we're teaching our kids to be fearful. So this is passing on It's going to be generational. What we're doing to harm our kids collectively, we're basically saying that we're behest to the big bad government, and that we're sharecroppers and we're slaves, and whatever they say, we have to do it. No more freedom. The optical illusion of freedom, because you get to walk from your house to your car. Because you get to walk from your car to your place of employment? Is that freedom? Because you could buy a Slurpee? That's freedom? No, that's not freedom. That's the illusion of freedom. That's a choice until they choose to take that choice away from you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Anyway, that's
I want to throw up an image. I want to throw up an image that yesterday, with what was going on in Atlanta, we didn't get a chance to throw this up. This is one of the fine protesters in New Mexico, where we talked about that self-defense shooting. She's wearing a shirt that, if you can see, it's kind of cut off. It says "Riots, not diets." I wanted to bring this up yesterday, but we ran out of time because we shifted over to Atlanta. I wanted to make sure everyone saw it because I think this is one of the funnier T-shirts to emerge from the anti-statue movement. Riots, not diets. I think we should put one of those on the Conservative Daily Store. What do you think of that?
Just the opposite.
Dead silence. Dead silence. Yeah, so we put up a poll on our Facebook live stream. Do you support a police walkout? 84% of you said yes. 16% of you said no today. So thank you for taking that poll. We're going to throw more polls up in the future. It's a good way to kind of poll the audience. And I guess, again, this is a good time to mention that this episode is brought to you by the Conservative Daily Store. It's our store. It helps us defer some of the costs associated with the live stream, with the podcast. This is another shirt that we have up there, the U.S. Border Patrol shirt. If you like this, if you want to help support the channel, really simple, U.S. Border Patrol, support Border Patrol. It's more important than ever. I like to call this the magic green shirt because when you wear this shirt, no matter where you go, you start getting dirty looks from dirty hippies, and all the illegal aliens start running away. So pick up one of your magic green shirts today at the Conservative Daily Store. The link is in the description on YouTube and Facebook. So any final words, Joe?
Courage. Courage is as infectious as fear, right? Act with courage. Like Marty said, we got to stop talking and start doing. Now, that has to evolve. Like, we have to evolve into a place where we actually know what that means, because most of you are sitting at home saying this: okay, you've walked me to the cliff. I took the red pill. I'm listening to you. I understand that they're destroying and eroding our society. I understand leadership is poor, but I'm standing at the cliff. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I jump off? What am I supposed to do? And I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll be having the conversation about what can you do, right? Well, how can you become effective in an environment if the only things that we have that in leadership is poor leadership? So we'll be working on that. But in the meantime, be the voice of reason. Stand up. If you fail to stand up, you surely will fall.
And we are going to see this get worse with police walkouts around the country. So if you don't already own a gun, this is a good chance to buy one. Do it legally. Make sure if you have the ability to take a class, learn the self-defense laws in your state. If you have the ability of the means, look into something like U.S. Law Shield or one of the other services. They don't sponsor the show, but it's just a good thing to have. Basically, you put a lawyer on retainer in case you ever have to use a firearm in self-defense, because it's going to get bad out there. And even if the police are there to protect you, we're seeing that law-abiding citizens are being arrested simply for defending themselves. So that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember that you can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts as well as the Google Play Store. You can also find us on the Podbean app as well as conservative-daily.com/podcast. You can also find us. We're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're listening to this audio, go to our Facebook channel, go to our YouTube channel and watch it there, because all the audio clips that you're hearing are also video clips. So I think that's it. Again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all fight together.